Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome to the social club session. My name is Shruti, and I'm co-hosting the session with Shauna today. So thank you all for attending this question and answer guest session with Monash University and the Melbourne Data Science Meetup group. Um, and today we'll be conducting this particular social club session um, along with the Melbourne Data Science Meetup group. Let us go through an introduction of who we are and what are we going to do today. Myself, Shruti, and Shauna, we are student organizers for the online weekly unit social club for Monash University. This particular unit is called Statistical Data Modeling, and this is a core subject for Master of Data Science students and Master of AI students.
In a meeting.
This particular social club focuses. I request everyone to kindly mute their microphones. Yes, thank you so much. So this particular social club is a common platform for all students and industry experts. We invite industry speakers to attend our sessions and share the experience with students to keep the students motivated and get through this difficult time due to the COVID-19 outbreak. We are very lucky and honored to be able to invite Melbourne Data Science Meetup group this week. And we have decided to open up this session to public so we might be able to benefit and inspire more students and data science enthusiasts.
So this is a brief overview of how we want to run the session today. We have a list of questions consolidated from all the respondents who were interested in this event. And we also separated the questions into different things. And during this 1.5 hour session, we are going to go over these questions. And meanwhile, if anyone have more follow-up questions coming up, to encourage more deeper discussions about the topic, feel free to drop it down in the chat section. So we will be constantly monitoring it. So let's enter into the Q&A session today. And let's say hi to Phil, Yuval, and Philip, and thanks them for attending our session today. So before we start asking you all the questions, would you mind to briefly introduce yourself first?
Should I go first?
Yes,
yep.
Sure.
Okay. I'm Phil. I'm the one on the left, the good-looking one.
Turn the video on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't look as good on video. Here we go. So, along with Yuval and Felipe, we run the Data Science Melbourne Meetup group, which is got over like 12,000 members now. So thanks to Shruti and Shauna for getting in touch with us and organising this, because it's basically our first foray into online meetups. So a bit about myself with regard to kind of career-wise. I, like a lot of you students, I collected a lot of degrees. I did engineering degree, engineering masters, and an engineering PhD. Pretty well because I liked the lifestyle at university. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Then went on holiday to travel the world and ended up in Melbourne and found myself needing a job. And I've been here ever since for the last 20 years. So I worked in a couple of, my first job was a kind of a boutique market research agency, and a kind of boutique data science consultancy was probably about 10 people. Then I made the leap into corporate world at the National Australia Bank. Then I went contracting for a while. Then I went back to corporate, but for IBM, which was more analytics consulting. And then I went back to contracting and done that for the past 7 or 8 years or so. So essentially self-employed. Now work, well, for the last 2 years, I've been working for what might be considered a startup, and we've been trying to crack the cryptocurrency trading world. So that's pretty well me.
Okay, I guess I'll go next because I'm next on the screen. So hi, I'm Yuval. Yeah, the guy in the middle, the better looking one. Yeah, so yeah, I run the meetup with Phil and Felipe, and a bit about my background. So I studied computer science and stats at uni, and got really interested in AI and in doing research. And yeah, didn't really, like Phil was saying, didn't really want to quite get a job yet or get too serious. So I decided to do a PhD. I went over to Edinburgh in the UK to do a PhD in AI, which is very exciting because that's where one of the places where AI was really born. So it was very exciting to go over there. I did a PhD in robotics, which was fun. Then I came back to Australia and did a postdoc at Monash, actually. We've got someone. Oh, that's better. Yeah, spent a few years at Monash doing research in natural language processing. And then I decided that hey, I wanted to try the business world. So moved over to the dark side, where I've been ever since for the last 15 years or so, with various organizations of different sizes. I guess most notably spent 7 years at iSelect, where I built a team of data scientists, data engineers, interns, and was fortunate enough to be in an organization that really valued data science. So there was a lot of support, which is pretty unique, certainly for at the time when I first started there. So we were able to really do some really cool things from a data science perspective, and build a really good culture of data science. And since about January last year, so just over a year, when I left iSelect, I co-founded a new startup where I work now. Very much heavily involved, kind of very heavily AI driven, building an AI system that essentially to help with online shopping. So it's still kind of early days, so I can't kind of talk too much about it, and we're still really figuring out a lot of it. But yeah, it's very exciting. It's really my first time in a startup, so it's very, very exciting to be there from the very beginning to help shape it. Yeah, other than that, just yeah, involved with the meetups, involved with the community in Melbourne, which is a very exciting place to be if you're a data scientist. So you guys are doing well, and thanks for inviting us to chat to you today, and I hope we can be of help. And please do keep coming to the meetups as well.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. That's me.
Awesome. I might go next. So I'm the grainy one in the picture. I'm Felipe Flores, and I've been in data what feels like a long time. So definitely all my professional career. When I was at uni, I was doing computer systems engineering and business management. And in computer systems engineering, I had to pick a major. Data was one of them. And it was out of 5 or 6 options. I actually did not pick data, even though I was already working in data at the time. I was working with small businesses at the time, kind of like as a freelancer. I was building databases, building reporting engines, doing some analysis on how to improve the business, and doing that for a couple of small businesses. And towards the end of my degree, I did my thesis on analyzing brainwave activity of truck drivers in the mines. And I built a model to translate the brainwave activity to a number from 1 to 5 to dictate how tired the drivers were. And then once I got to number 4, they were stopped and pulled essentially out of the truck, so they couldn't drive anymore. And that I was kind of like a, doing my thesis on that, and that product. So I was only one part of the product, and the product became a commercial company, which is still going. And even though I was like, in that case, I was exposed to startups, I was not very embedded in the commercial side of the business or anything like that. I was literally just, there's somebody who's talking. Jean Lee. Yeah. So essentially, I was part of this startup, but wasn't involved in the commercial side at all. And then, but it was nice to see that it could happen, that you could build a great product, an interesting product, and that it could become a company and grow a market. And that company is still going on today. From then on, I spent 7 years in consulting. Consulting was I felt at the time that it was a good training ground to see lots of different businesses and lots of different problems to be solved very quickly. The work was not all data science. It was a mixture of data warehousing, data migration, data analysis, reporting, etc. And after 7 years doing consulting like that, I went and started my own company, analytics consulting company. I did that for about 5 years. We grew the analytics team to about 23, 24 people, and we had some software developers as well. And then I sold my part of the business. The business is still going, but I was very burnt out and found it really difficult going into startup land that first time, where I was doing my own thing. I didn't manage things very well. I didn't delegate very well. I was a really bad leader at the time, and it just took a toll on me. So I've got lots of war stories and about what not to do, a lot of lessons of what not to do. So we can talk about that if people are interested. And from there, I went into ANZ Bank as head of data science, and I was working in one of the main divisions of the bank, and I was the first data science hire into that part of the bank, and started building a team and building internal products that then we sold to the customers of the bank. And I was there for about 4 years. Over that time, we grew the team to almost 50 people, and we made about $100 million worth of new revenue for the bank during that time. And then I moved on, went to a boutique financial services company. It's called Liberty Financial. It's a group of about 12 companies, and I was setting up and looking after data science for the entire group, which was exciting to get to see multiple areas of the business. It was a role that was different to the two that I had before, my startup and then the bank, where we were building data-driven products. At Liberty Financial, my role was more similar to a chief data officer, where you have to improve the business through data-driven decisions, and you're competing on analytics. So that was a bit of a different taste. All the ANZ and Liberty both being corporates. And then earlier at the start of this year, I moved to a healthcare AI company called Honeysuckle Health. And we're working in the healthcare industry to help it be more data-driven in the decisions that they make, and help people live healthier lives through data-driven recommendations. So that's kind of how I got to today, enjoying being back at a startup. It is my personal preference. I love the energy and the buzz at the beginning of a company, and the possibilities of creating new products and being really creative on the business side as well as the data science side. That's me. So I'll hand it over back to the organizers to start going through the questions.
Yep. Thank you all for introducing yourself. And now we're going to enter into the most exciting part, which is the question time. And before we start the question, I would also like you all to know that this session is actually recorded. And then, so for the first question, it's more a general question. So what are the main differences between the corporates and startups in terms of data maturity, culture, or working hours?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go for it. You guys should turn on your, keep your videos on. Yuval, you as well.
Okay.
I'm just worried my kids
Yes,
might pop the head around the door.
That's all right. They're welcome.
Okay, so earlier on today, I was looking at this question and made just a generic list basically of I had corporates in one column and startups in another column, and basically racked my brain about what's what in each. And just to be clear, when we talk about startups, we're not talking about the traditional startup. It's just, it might be a small company that's been going for a while. It's not necessarily one that's just there to seek millions in funding and develop a product. So we're talking about the difference between big corporates and smaller, more boutique entities. So looking at it from a kind of student's point of view, in a corporate environment, there's likely to be much more of a structured graduate program. You might join a graduate program and they'll kind of take hold of you and take care of you and groom you, and you can like choose which path you take. In a smaller company or a startup, if they're recruiting a data scientist, you are probably you're probably the data science department. So there won't necessarily be that kind of structured career path or people to learn off, because you might land there on day one and they'll say, you're the expert, what do we do? So that's kind of one big difference. Another difference, corporate world, you might, I don't know after this lockdown finishes, but traditionally it's a bit more 9 to 5. When you're in bigger teams, you've got to rely on, you've got to have meetings and things like that. So you can't just rock up when you want. You've got to be fitting around other people. So whereas smaller companies, a lot more flexible. I mean, the first company I worked in, I'd cycle there. I'd sit there in my cycling gear till lunchtime, go down the gym, have a shower, and cycle in whenever I finished doing the work. So it's a lot more flexible and a lot more free, basically. Another shout out, guys, when you think I'm going on too long. But another big difference you'll find is in a corporate world. If you want a particular bit of software, or you've seen a data source that that might be useful for your analysis, there's a big process to go through. It's not like you can just download it from the internet and away you go. You've got to fill in a lot of forms, get approval, and there's a lot of process that's there for a good reason, but it might be frustrating for you that you have to wait a while to get on with your job. Whereas in a smaller company or a startup, you just knock on the boss's door and he gives you his credit card and Bob's your uncle. Might take 10 minutes to get what you want. That's a very big difference. You feel you can you can actually get to what you want to do, which is the data science, a lot quicker without having to wait. What else have I got? Corporate world, you'll find things might do traditionally move very slow. That's just the way it is. In a smaller company world, you basically move at your own pace. That's what I find. And also in a corporate world, sometimes it's not all the time. You might do a data science project, and you might not get to see the results of your analysis. It's then passed on, productionized to different departments, and that might be the last you ever hear of it. So it might be a bit, depending on kind of what you want out of your job, it might be a bit frustrating not to know the results of your work. Whereas in a smaller company, startup, you know, if you don't succeed in what you're doing, you might be out of a job. So you've got to be you've got to be in your analysis, and you'll be owning it, and you'll really know that, you know, what the results are, and if it makes a difference for the company. The other thing is, big companies, a lot of politics. Small company, it's what you make it. I mean, one reason I preferred contracting, to be honest, is you're essentially doing the same job, but you can go home at 5 o'clock and you don't have to worry about the office politics. As a kind of contractor, it's nice not to have to worry about it. You can just say la-di-da-di-da, nothing to do with me. What else have I got? In corporate world, you might get stuck in one particular role. So you're building credit risk models at a bank, that you might be the credit risk guy. So you know, you might that might be your job for the future. So you want to make sure you kind of move around if you want variety. In a startup, smaller companies, you know, it's a lot easier to get more variety, I think. John, should I stop there and pass on to someone else? I've got one more thing. Sorry, in corporate world, you're often asked, you might do something and you might think, why the hell are we doing this? And you can't see a logical reason. You know, as an experienced data scientist, that it's going to go nowhere. And quite often you're right, and it will go nowhere. And you just feel as if you've wasted a lot of time just because there's a lot of box ticking and things to do. So it might get frustrating that you're not in control of you know, explaining to people this is a complete waste of time. Let's can it. Whereas, you know, in a small company, you're probably likely to be listened to a bit more. If you don't think something's going down the right path or just wasting our time, then, you know, it's a lot easier to convey that message. I think that's me for a while.
Yeah, well, I've got a list as well, very similar to Phil's. But I'll try and give another perspective, I suppose. I guess, yeah, I mean, like everything, there's pros and cons, right? So on one hand, in a startup, yeah, you're everything. You're, you know, in corporate, you're pigeonholed a bit. You do one role, and you're part of it. Then you have to collaborate with other teams. Whereas in a startup, you're all the teams. You're the data science. You're also the data engineering. You're the DBA. You know, you're the architect. You're a few things, which is great. It's great. You know, it's really exciting. It's really stimulating, and it's an opportunity to get involved with all those things. But on the other hand, you don't have the services that you get in a corporate, you know, such as, you know, IT infrastructure and you know, DBA and sometimes even HR, you know, is useful to have. So it kind of really depends on where you feel more comfortable. But I've certainly found since moving to a startup that I've enjoyed getting my hands in a few different things. So not just the core data science, but, you know, a lot more of the engineering, the architecture, design work, you know, operations. Because yeah, it's you don't have departments, you don't have teams. You have usually one team, and you just do everything. It's a great experience to do all the different things and see how they connect together, and see something through to the end, from, you know, from the end to end, as opposed to doing your bit and then handing over to someone else and not seeing it again. Yeah, you know, startups obviously are much more agile than corporate. So yeah, you get to do things quicker, iterate faster, fail faster. You know, try many more things, and you can just decide in the morning what you're going to work on that day. It's really cool. You know, in corporate, there's project management, there's prioritization meetings, and it's obviously much harder to change priorities and to change direction when there's more people involved. It's just the nature of it. You know, it's just like it's harder to steer a bigger ship, right? So it's really nice that you can, from day to day, look at what you've done, see where you are, and decide how the day is going to look like. You know, stand-ups have a lot more meaning, I think, in startups. Those daily stand-ups in the morning. You get to do more research, I guess, or R&D in a startup. Whereas in the corporate, you have what's known as BAU, which is business as usual, which is the keeping the lights on. So the support for existing tools that you've built, or providing data or insights to your stakeholders, you know, to internal or external clients. So requests that come from the business or from outside the business that you need to service. So that's known as the BAU, the business as usual. And often that really fills up your day really quickly and doesn't leave much time for the project work, the R&D. And that I found that in corporate world, one of the most challenging things to balance, get the right balance. Because if you stop doing research, you know, if you're just being reactive, then you're not really progressing, you're not moving forward. And as a data scientist, you're not keeping yourself happy. On the other hand, you know, in corporate, you got the teams around you, more people. It's more social. It's more, there's more going on. Sometimes startups can be a little bit lonely, you know, especially if it's a small team. And I found that, you know, being in a corporate, you're used to, you know, lots of people around you to have coffee, lunches with, just to talk with. And in startups, it can sometimes be a bit more lonely. I think that's my list.
Good. I might jump in as well, and I've found that in traditionally when people think of startups, that's seen as the exciting place to work, right? It's something new, it's exciting, that's the place to go. And corporate is generally seen as like the old and boring and kind of like, why would you go there almost? And as you heard from Phil and Yuval, like they're both good. They both have different strengths, and they give you different things. They develop your skills in different ways. And what's important to realize, I think, is that all large corporations started off being a small startup at one point. So they were quick and agile, and that's seen usually as exciting. So the question is, why are they not like that anymore, right? The reason is because when you're building a company, you're building a machine that makes money. And in this machine, you want it to be consistent and repeatable processes where you put $1 in on one side, there's people working, things happening, and on the other side, it gives you $2 or $3. And in building a business is a money-making machine. In building this machine, once you have a formula that is consistent in giving you $1 in and then $2 out, once you have that, you want to lock it down and make sure that it doesn't change, because then you are at risk of throwing away all your effort to find out the process that gives you this extra money. Because of that reason is that corporates are slower to change. It's because they've found products and services that already are successful. They found things that already win, and they're keen to keep those. And a lot of the advisory and ancillary parts of a corporate that are not doing the innovation or the service delivery sometimes, the extra parts of a company, they're there to stop any changes to the processes, because then they can start losing money. Having said that, there are organizations, and over time, more and more large organizations are starting off separate areas within the company where they are wanting to fuel innovation. And that gives you a really good exposure to this term that's usually called intrapreneurship, where you're kind of being like an entrepreneur inside a large company, where you have a salary that's coming in and you get to work on the new things that the company is doing. Also, it's a really good mix of the two worlds, very exciting. And definitely an avenue for some people. Other people would like to work on the process that's already working in terms of making money, and that business process can always be improved. And that might mean taking up existing models and making them better. Existing models that already do market targeting around marketing, or do churn prediction, different applications, the model can be improved. And then this is avenues of work for a lot of people. I'm seeing in the chat that a lot of people are students, or students and workers. And so keep the comments coming through on the chat. And then the other side is going into a startup. And as you heard from Phil and Yuval, it means by being a much smaller team, it means that you get to do more of the work, which means that more of the end-to-end process, the end-to-end value chain for a business, more of that sits on your shoulders or on a really small team's shoulders. So you get you have to spread your time across a lot more initiatives, and you have to be talking directly to clients, to the business, to trying to find a way to make a process that makes money. Being a successful startup, having this process, and then you turn into a big company. So the excitement of the startup is being on the journey to finding that. Being in a startup, it really forces you to think more about the runway that you have as a company. So if a company raised some money or got some investment, it means that you have a set of money that will give you a limited amount of time until you run out of money. Between now and that point where you run out of money, you have to try as many different things as you can in order to get revenue and sell something to clients. And being in a startup, it really forces you to think about that. It really forces you to think about what the market wants, how would we pitch it, how do we change the product in order to make it better. And that really, that fact that you're much more closer to the commercials, with the fact that you're working on many more initiatives, it really broadens your horizons going forward. But it's definitely not something, it's not for everyone. And that's okay. And if people are comfortable and happy working in corporates, that's great. And if people want to find this entrepreneurship type role, that's great. And if people want to work in startups, also great. So we're here to discuss the differences between them. And those are some of the ones that I see. So with that, we might move on to the next question.
Yes, so this question basically also linked to the next question, which is about what are the main pros and cons for us to consider before we actually deciding to work at a startup or a corporate company.
I'm happy to take that one first.
Yeah, go for it.
I think a lot of it depends on what your interests are, where you think you fit right more comfortably, and if you might not know, I guess, this early on in your career, you might not know, so it's okay. So ideally, you do a bit of both, right, to find out. What I think one of the main things that you miss out on in a startup is one of those soft skills. That's in fact many soft skills but mainly the stakeholder communication skills, working with stakeholders as in non-technical people. From a technical perspective, I think depending on, clearly in a startup, your work is more technical. It's predominantly technical, whereas in corporate, it just depends on where you are, what kind of corporate environment you're in, and your role. It could still be very, very technical. So from a technical perspective, you could equally be working on interesting things in both environments. Again, it depends on the corporate scenario. If you're interested in solidifying your technical skills, and which I would recommend early on in your career, focus on your technical skills. If you're not going to a startup, make sure you choose a corporate environment where you'll be able to work on your technical skills, but the right technical skills. So you don't want to end up in a role where, as a data scientist, you're building reports. So you're not a reporting analyst. You're not a, what's called a business intelligence developer, a BI developer. I mean, maybe you are, but I assume I'm mainly talking to a data science audience. So as a data scientist, you don't want to be working on those kind of technical skills. You want to be working on interesting data science work, such as, interesting analytics, interesting modeling, interesting machine learning. And so you want to be in an environment where where the data science function is working on such areas, and where the organization is supportive of those functions. They're aware of the value. There's still many organizations in Australia that are really immature from that perspective. They, as much as we hear the hype of data science and AI, there's still many organizations that don't truly understand it and therefore don't truly support it. And so you end up doing reporting. So you want to make sure that that you end up in the right environment for if your focus is to develop your technical skills, which I think it should be early on in your career. What I was saying at the beginning of my answer to the question was that if your focus is to develop your soft skills, which something you should do, as you mature and as you start to feel that you've got really solid experience applying your technical skills, and you want to start thinking about things like team leadership, team management, working collaboratively with other teams. When that becomes your focus, and therefore you need more experience with those soft skills. So, doing meetings, delivering results, presenting results, having conversations with senior people, with management, with executives. When you reach the point in your career where that's the focus, then probably a corporate environment, it sounds obvious, is more suitable for you at that point. Because in a startup, you tend to not have those experiences, especially at the beginning, early on in those startups, when it's really mostly about the technical aspect of things, where you might have one or two, investors, or you might, the founder and CEO of the organization. Obviously you're interacting with that person a lot, but it's not the kind of mixed experience that you get in the corporate environment. We get to work with lots of different kinds of people, sales managers, finance managers, financial analysts, marketing teams. So there's really important relationships with key stakeholders that you need to have as a person, as a data scientist. As you progress in your career, that you're definitely going to get more of that in a corporate environment. So again, it really depends on where you are and what your interests are. Some people don't ever want to be in a place where they need to have good soft skills. They want to just be a technical person, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And if you have the opportunity to do that for your entire career, yeah, well done. It's it can get difficult as you become more and more senior, more experienced. But it's absolutely fine if you can get that opportunity, go for it. But otherwise, depending on where you are and the stage of your career, these are the kind of factors that should go into that decision.
Yeah. So thank you. We actually got another follow-up question from one of the students. So he was wondering, so from a student's perspective, what would be a better choice, whether it's a corporate environment or a startup environment for you?
So it depends. It depends on you as a person. There is no one right choice for everyone. It's not like everyone should go into corporate and nobody should go into startups, or the other way around. It depends on what you want to gain experience in first. So if you are getting your first job, what I've, at least in my experience, when I went in to get my first job coming out of university, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what the jobs were going to be like. And in my case, I didn't have too much choice really when it came to jobs, and I just happened to get a job in consulting, and that was great. And I took that job, and then from there I got to understand a little bit about how different companies work, and then made my next move. I think as for your first job, I would say don't overthink it. Prepare a good portfolio, apply broadly, find areas that you're interested in. If you do have interest, like if you're interested in finance or healthcare or anything like that, technology, find jobs that are aligned with that. If you don't have any specific interest, I didn't, definitely, you can apply more broadly. But it depends on the skills that you want to acquire, as in which one you should choose. And those skills are the ones that Yuval was just mentioning before. So if you do want to work with more varied types of roles in the organization, then a corporate is going to be good for you. If you're keen to develop your soft skills along with technical skills, a corporate is going to help that too. But I think Yuval had an excellent advice for everyone, that early in your career you want to choose the roles that are really going to force you to learn technically. From a technical perspective, learn the most. And I saw that that person, Baavi, had a follow-up question, which is around hiring. And like, what do startups look for when they're hiring? And other people might be wondering what corporates look for when they're hiring. And we're actually going to have another webinar in 2 weeks' time through Data Science Melbourne Meetup group. And that webinar is going to be specifically focused on recruitment. So how to hire, how companies hire, what do they look for, what's the recruitment process, all those types of questions we will be answering in that webinar in 2 weeks' time. So follow Data Science Melbourne Meetup group for that. And today we'll stay focused on the differences between startup and corporate, and what the life is like once you start those jobs. And I see some other questions coming in, which is great. Keep them coming. So I'll pass back to the moderator to keep us moving with those questions.
Can I jump in here?
If you turn your video on.
Oh. So
yeah,
I've got another anecdote. So Felipe was saying about his first job. So when I came to Australia, my first job, I was pretty desolate and broke, and I was backpacking with no money. So it was go and pick fruits or find a job. And I saw an advert for a researcher, and I thought, I'm just spending 11 years in university. I've just been doing a bit of research. I probably qualified for that, and it ended up being a market research company, which I absolutely knew nothing about. But I guess my point is, sometimes you don't really have a choice for your first job, but once you get a job, it's always easier to get another job from a job rather than being unemployed. So don't necessarily be too choosy about your first job. any job's a start. And then once you get a bit of experience, it becomes a lot easier. And my other point was going to be, it's not just corporate or startup. That, should I choose corporate, startup, big company, small company? You've got to look at the people as well. So sometimes you might, whether you're in a corporate, you're going to be joining a team essentially, or in a startup, you're going to be joining a team, but a smaller team. But you've got to look at the people as well. You might make your decision purely based on the chemistry or the reputation of someone who works there. So it might be nothing to do with whether it's a corporate or startup or whatever. It might just be there's a particular person that you want to learn off, and throughout your career, it will be those personal contacts that progress your career, rather than where you've worked. To be honest. Okay, I'll hand back to the moderator.
Yep. So yeah, we got a lot of questions coming up at the moment, and thank you for that. So I might actually progress to the next question, which is about how is the data science startups different from other startups?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand the question because we're all data scientists, so we don't really know about other startups. So we're assuming everyone working in a data science startup. So
yeah. Actually, I think I have a comment on that. Actually, just occurred to me earlier. The one advantage of being, I suppose, a data science startup. What does that actually mean? It means that it's a data science kind of organization first. So that's the focus. In many organizations, data science or analytics isn't at the top. It's at the list of priorities. It's almost an afterthought. And what that means is, in many organizations, you get there and you realize, can't swear. Crap. I can't get my hands on the data. Or when I get my hands on the data, it's in a mess. It's really messy. It's really dirty. Hasn't been collected properly. I'll get it and it's aggregated. I don't get the granular data. To get the granular data, I need to fight. And even when I do, it's missing information that hasn't been collected properly and managed and maintained correctly. And so you're sitting downstream from that, and you're expected to build a model or do some analysis, provide some insights, and it takes you 10 times longer than it should. When you start a new company, and it's a data science company, and you're not inheriting any of these legacy systems or databases, you can design how the data is collected and how the data is maintained and how the data is modeled, how it's structured, the granularity, the frequency, everything, to make sure that you can build the best models and provide the best insights, in minutes, in hours, not in days and weeks and months. So I think that's the luxury of a data science meetup compared to, startup, a data science startup or organization compared to a non-data science startup, is that you get that opportunity to design the data structures the right way from the start. And then, if you get it wrong, you've only got yourself to blame. But at least you've got that opportunity to do that from the start.
Yep. So thank you for that. And what about what's the current market for the data science startup companies in Melbourne, and how does it actually compare to the market in Sydney or overseas?
So, I mean, I can only go off my personal experience. I'm not a recruiter, so I have really no idea about what's going on in Sydney or overseas. But for example, literally in the last 7 days, I've been contacted by 3 companies trying to recruit 4 people from what I would call startups, So they are there, but the problem is these startups, they can't just take on a graduate. it's not an option for them to take on a graduate because they can't afford to. They've got a particular problem they need solving. They need someone with experience, and so there's a bit. So from a graduate's perspective, you're not. I don't think there are roles there, but you're not going to land them because you don't have the necessary experience or skills to kind of hit the ground running, and these companies don't have the money basically to train you. So they are there, but you're going to need a bit of experience first before you can land a job like that. And there was one other thing I was going to say. So overseas. Yeah. So 5-6 years ago, when we started the Data Science Meetup group, I mean, one of the reasons I was wanting to get involved with it was there was a lot of opportunities for data scientists overseas, particularly in America. I had the opportunity to go to America, and I just didn't want to. And it wasn't right for my kids and my wife. So we set the group up to try and make Melbourne, to try and put back to Melbourne, make Melbourne attractive for startups. And I think we've pretty well in the last 5 years, Melbourne has really become one of the top places in the world for startups, and I hope we've contributed to that in a small way. But on an Australia kind of place, on an Australian platform, I say Melbourne is the place to be, and even on a worldwide stage, it's a pretty good place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. So now I'm going to pass this to Shruti. So Shruti will be hosting the second half of the session.
And in between, can we do a couple of quick questions from the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So now we'll first take a few questions, and then we'll also take up questions from the participants. So let's move.
And we can do quick answers as well, if that helps.
Yeah, sure. So let's move to a few role-based questions. The question would be, what is a daily routine of a data scientist in a corporate different from that of a startup? And what challenges should we be prepared for?
Question.
I'll repeat the question. What is the daily routine of a data scientist when we are working in a corporate different from the one who's working in a startup? Are there any challenges that we should be prepared for before we get into a startup or a corporate job?
So I'll jump in. I mean, with a startup, there really isn't a routine. It's like, what problem do I need to solve today? I mean, you're kind of winging it, to be honest. So, I mean, what I've been doing for the last 2 years, I won't know what I'm doing tomorrow until I've finished what I'm doing today, because I don't know where that path's going to take me. Whereas a corporate, there is a routine basically. So you will have your 9 o'clock stand up around the water cooler, and everyone will disappear at 5 o'clock. So it's very kind of, you will feel as if that there's everything's routine driven, whereas in a startup there isn't any routine basically. From my experience.
Yeah, and so I touched on this earlier. In a corporate, you have more of the BAU, like business as usual. So you have to balance your project work and the responding to requests. And I guess, in terms of what challenges to be prepared for, be prepared to have to switch between the two, and be prepared that you would need to spend frustratingly more time on responding to requests than you want to on your, on the more interesting work. You're there often to provide a service, internal service to the organization, and they need to make decisions from the data. Yeah, kind of you're being relied on to much more on a regular daily basis.
Yeah, I agree. I think the corporate has more structure in that sense, that in the corporate you might be solving a problem that that has been put in front of you. While in a startup, you start sort of one step behind and you say, what problem should I solve? And then you go and solve that problem, and then you go back to, okay, what problem should I solve next? So it's more iterative like that. I might sneak in a question or two from the chat, if that's all right, because they're growing and I want people to. So there's one from Ramishka. It says, quick question: what is considered an acceptable time frame you can leave a company, startup or corporation? How long do you need to work there before you can leave? I think earlier, personal opinion, I'd love to hear from Yuval and Phil. Personal opinion, early in your career, well, I would say most of your career, try to have jobs for years. I see a lot of people moving after a year, sometimes less, and then you look at CVs and they have 5 jobs in the last 5. If you have 5 jobs in the last 5 years, I personally, when I'm hiring, I don't see it as a good indicator. I think when you join a company, you need some time to understand the company and the problems, and then you can start being productive and solving them. How about you guys?
So, yeah, I can jump in. So, I mean, my first few jobs, my typical length was like 2 years, and I felt after 2 years, my goal is always to make myself redundant. So as a good data scientist, you've done your job when you're no longer required. So my first job was kind of automating, it's a bit tedious, but it was automating monthly reports and things like that. And I kind of automated it all and think, well, I've ticked that box, here you go. I need to move on to something else now. So my goal is always to make myself redundant, essentially. And there's 2 years should be about that. And I mean, you do get people saying now, if you've been in a job for more than 3 years, it means you're unemployable. So people, if you've been in a role for a particularly long time, people are asking, can't you find another job? So does no one want you? That's another point to make. There was another question down here from Danielle. What's the best way to shift your career to data science, data analysis without going back to university? And I've got a good answer. Well, my advice to that would be get a pet project. So something you're interested in. It might be tennis or cricket or the weather, whatever. Find a project that you've got a passion about and there's data to it, and just build something, blog about it, and come to some good findings. Do a Kaggle competition, but teach yourself basically. That's essentially what I did. I spent a long time at university. Well, everything I've learned, literally the best things I've learned have been post-university, when essentially you've had problems to solve. So the only way you really learn is when someone says, here's a problem, and you've got to learn the tricks and the software and the tools and the programming languages to solve that problem. And that's when you really learn. So find yourself a pet project, and you'll learn a lot because you're passionate about solving your own project. If it's kind of any old project that your academic supervisor's given you, you might not have that particular interest, so you won't have that passion about it.
I agree. I think I've seen people who have that passion project. I saw, for example, one guy that started a blog about creating models to do footy tipping, and every week he would write about what improvements to the model he was doing and things like that. And he wasn't making any money with the footy tipping, so it wasn't blowing anything out of the water. But through that passion project, he was showing his knowledge, his thought process. And when he had this, he put this in his CV, and I saw him and people like that get hired literally after a quick coffee meeting, because the hiring manager had already seen their work, essentially. And that shows a lot, speaks volumes about the person. The other one that I've seen that I really like too is solving a problem that your company has using data. So essentially, it's going back to Phil's point, which is like, if you want a data science job or data analysis job, start doing it. Start doing data analysis, data science, and that can be on your passion, and or it can be in your work. And at work, there's always a lot of problems that go, a lot of questions that go unanswered, and a lot of problems that go unsolved because people don't have the time and resources, or it's not top priority. You can pick one of those problems and you can start to solve them on your own time, off your own bat, and learning along the way, especially if you're interested in it. And doing that, through that process, I've seen people turn any job into a data science job because of the value of the answers that the company is getting. And you do that 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times, and you start handing the results to management. Managers are going to notice, and they're going to say, well, why is this person answering phones when they're so good at analyzing data and it's much more valuable? Let's get them analyzing data. And Yuval?
Another question which I wanted to respond to, a question from Deepak, which is what do companies expect from graduates, whether it's startups or corporates? And that was going to be my answer, is passion and curiosity, which go kind of often go hand in hand. That is the number one thing I look for when I'm hiring, to show that you're really passionate about data science. And most of us are. I mean, if we're in data science, if you're in data science because of the hype, you want to get into it, then that's a different story. But if you're genuinely into data science, then if you genuinely understand what's possible, what the potential is, then you are naturally really excited about it. So show it. Show that you're excited. Show that you're passionate. If you can demonstrate that passion is translated into something such as a side project, great. We all know about Kaggle, right? So do 1 or 2 Kaggle competitions. Create a portfolio, create a GitHub account and put some stuff in there. It helps. But even if you haven't, just demonstrate that you're passionate in an interview. Demonstrate that you're passionate about the area, about data science. And think about the actual job that you're going to and how you would apply it. That is one of the number one things that employers look for.
But just on that, mainly thanks to Yuval, a few years ago, the Meetup group started an internship program, and the way it works is basically we got 10 companies who were recruiting, and we said we'll give you a 5-minute pitch and invite a bunch of students along, and the result of that was we got 350 CVs, and just going through the CVs, they were all identical, literally. I'm all doing a Masters of Data Science. Literally, you could not pick between the CVs. And that was the feedback from the companies. It was, great, I've got all these CVs, but they're all the same. So what we had to think, and we thought, well, and the kind of year after we started the Melbourne Datathon. So what we then said was, the Datathon is where you've got to analyze some data, and if you enter the Datathon and you want to be part of our kind of recruitment process, well, we were just a kind of matchmaker between people who wanted to employ people and students. Attach your CV to your submission, and literally we've got about 5 Datathons now, and the kind of the take-up rate went from 350 to about 30, literally 35 for each Datathon, and every single one of those people who wanted a job pretty well ended up with one, because they'd shown the passion and they'd actually demonstrated their analytics capabilities. Some of them might have not been that great, but the fact that you've demonstrated you want to give it a go is ticking a box. And a lot of people come to me and they said, have you got an internship you can tell me about? And I said, well, enter our Datathon. And they'll say to me, I don't think I'm good enough to enter the Datathon yet. And I'll say, well, you've already failed the first hurdle. If you're not prepared to give it a go, no one's going to employ you. So, give it a go, have a go. It doesn't matter if you're still learning, just give it a go. And it's demonstrating that passion, which will impress employers rather than your academic grades, to be honest.
I completely agree. I think it's having the passion, giving it a go, backing yourself, even if you're starting out, and that's what's gonna set you apart. Because as Phil was saying, like when we're hiring through those batches, every CV looked the same, and we all have, like Phil, Yuval, and myself, we have people reaching out to us like on LinkedIn and emails and things, where somebody might say, "Oh, I'm finishing a PhD in machine learning. Can I have a job, please?" And I usually reply with, "Can you send me some of your work?" And they're like, "Oh no, I don't have anything." And I'm like, "Well, there's no portfolio, there's no publicly available analysis, there's no Kaggle competitions, there's nothing." And so I personally find that quite frustrating, because I would like to see the capabilities of the people that I'm going to be speaking to in terms of a job. So find these passion projects that can definitely be diathons, that can be things on GitHub, as Yuval said. It can be Kaggle projects. Find these passion projects where you can show your expertise, and with that, that's how you're going to stand out, because everything else can be a lot of the same. I see some questions about interview process and current market for jobs and things like that. Those questions we're going to be covering in 2 weeks in our webinar about recruitment and jobs. So we might pass it back to the moderators actually, and see which question, if it's a question from the chat or not, which one they want to tackle next.
Okay, thank you. Next question that we would like to take is based on the future prospects for data science. What would be the future for data science when it comes to startups and corporates in terms of the global market and Australia?
And is this you mean jobs or
jobs for startups and in corporate? What is the current market trend for global and Australia?
So at the moment, every industry needs data scientists, and we need as many data scientists as we can get, almost. Obviously, as there's more and more grads from data science programs, it means that the bar is rising. The competition is getting tougher, more fierce, and you need to be able to differentiate yourself. Additionally, within the job, there's a lot of people that come, say, only with certain technical skills. Thinking about rounding out your technical skills is important, and also establishing some domain knowledge as you grow into your career. But if you have a solid understanding of a business and a market, and you're able to solve problems with the tools that data science has, and solve problems in a way that make a business impact, you'll never be short of a job, even if it gets super competitive, is my view. How about Yuval or Phil? How about you guys?
Don't know. I'm hoping to retire quite soon, so it doesn't worry me.
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on it earlier a bit. Like, we hear everyone needs a data scientist, data science, and AI and all that. And certainly, of course, yes, sure, the awareness for it is growing. Therefore, the need. But I think, in Australia is still, lagging a bit behind the rest of the world in terms of that maturity. Still catching up. So there's no doubt that there's more opportunities overseas of the right kind of roles, but that's shifting. As Phil was saying, Melbourne's, becoming a really great place to be a data scientist in, and there are more and more organizations that are seeing the potential, but also maturing their internal processes and infrastructure to make the most of data science. Many organizations still don't have a data warehouse or a structured set of databases to work from. So you do need to be careful. So yeah, the trend is positive. It's it's getting better. But I think it's still quite a long way to go, I think, here.
Okay, thank you. Close to this particular question, do you think there is a more or better data science market available in Sydney when compared to Melbourne? Is there any such trend?
I think we covered that one before. Essentially, yeah, I think Data Science Melbourne Meetup group has done a lot to foster the data science talent in Melbourne, and there's a lot of international companies that have chosen Melbourne over Sydney because of that. And that was the work that Yuval and Phil did way before I joined the meetup. They've been doing this for 6 years and really created and fostered a community, which is now the second largest data science meetup group in the world, which is amazing. Sydney has a lot of activity when it comes to startups in general. I think from a data science perspective, Melbourne is a bigger hub, even though Sydney is coming up quickly.
Okay, let's take one question from the participants. What are the most in-demand skills for data scientists in both corporate and startup?
I don't know about in demand, but I can tell you the skills you will need. Pretty well, the ability, the main skill you will need is the ability to write code and munge data to, take a data set and manipulate it and munge it to tell you a story. So the skills are literally, you will need to be able to program in Python or R or whatever. You'll need to know SQL. That's kind of SQL is a language where if your data's in a database, you can give it some instructions and extract data in the way you want. And you will need some way of visualizing data, a tool to visualize data. And these days, there's a lot of trend now to all this deep learning and AI stuff. I can't really comment on that because I've never really been involved in it, but I'm not sure if having knowing deep learning and all the tools and widgets that go with that. I can't comment on whether those are in demand skills, but there's always going to be the core traditional skills that needs doing. So, any other comments, guys?
Okay.
I think you covered it well. There's some questions and comments here about. Rachel says the Datathon is the best thing I ever did. Thanks for that, Rachel. We have another question from Aman Piyai who says, when is the Datathon? So generally in the second half of the year. Is that right, guys?
The Datathon has two requirements. The main one being a data set. When we get a data set and a sponsor, we can do it. But without a data set and without a sponsor, it won't be happening. So if anyone got any ideas, get in touch with us. Yeah, so we're working on it. If you guys can help us find a data set, that would be great. There's a question here. Our PhD from Nader. Are PhD students called graduates when they apply for a job? It varies, but in my experience, usually yes, if you don't have experience before that. In some jobs, you go from a PhD sort of to a junior person. But that's my experience. I know that Phil and Yuval both have PhDs, so they might see it differently.
No, there's no distinction. Yeah, if you've got no business experience, you're a graduate. Having done PhD research project does demonstrate that you can work independently, and you've got some project management, kind of time management experience. It does help, but you are a graduate.
Yeah, there's a question here that I'd love to hear your answer, Yuval, actually. So it says, as you progress in your careers, how much time did you dedicate to your own projects and professional development versus spending time building the products for your companies or at your companies? This is a question from Benny. So the time split between personal projects and personal professional development versus time building products for and at your companies as you progress your career?
Yeah. Good question. There's definitely put plenty of time and effort into your personal development. How much? It depends how much time you've got. I mean, you still need to work the hours that you get paid for. And when you're young and you don't have commitments outside of work, you use them as much as you can to develop personally, whether that's technical or growing your network and going to pursuing to develop yourself on the soft skills. Whether it's reading articles or doing courses or speaking to people, finding mentors to speak to. It's very important to work on that. Often the things that you can't work on is part of your day job. We're all developing. It doesn't matter where you are in your career. There's always more that you can learn about yourself, about how to be better at what you do. So yeah, always allow that time.
When the early days of Kaggle, so I met Anthony Goldblum, who started Kaggle, who's actually from Melbourne. I first met him about 3 months before Kaggle launched, and I thought, this is a great plan. And I spent probably the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of Kaggle just doing Kaggle competitions, because I wanted to learn all these new fancy techniques, and there was no the place I was working, there was no one there to teach. The techniques were that new. There was no one there to teach me. So I learned. I had to go to places like Kaggle to learn, and it was an easy way to learn, because you got the best people from around the world, and they'd literally tell you how they were solving problems. So they were kind of funneling all the best techniques for you, and it saved you. It saved me literally going after to Google things, basically. It was kind of a collaborative where it fast-tracked your interest in your research. So yes, I had a pet project doing Kaggle, but it was for my day job, but it was a replacement for my day job from a learning perspective, because nothing else existed that could teach me as quick.
That's what happens when you're one of the OGs.
What's an OG?
An original gangster.
All right.
Somebody who was there right at the beginning. Yeah, definitely. I think working on your own development is super important, and some of the projects that you'll tackle at work, they will force you to grow and develop, and you need to learn in order to deliver. There'll be some things that you're delivering that you already know how to do, and besides that, carving out some time to learn new things is really important. I personally always feel that I'm lagging behind on that side, especially compared to Yuval and Phil. I feel like their learning veracity is really great and very admirable. In my case, at the moment, and for maybe a couple of years now, I set half an hour a day to learn new things for my career, and that's sort of a set time that I have blocked in my calendar at midday every day. It doesn't always happen at midday, but it doesn't happen every single day, but it happens most days. Sometimes it moves around a little bit, but that's a reminder for me to learn something completely new. And besides that, there's projects that I'm delivering that help me learn new things and grow, and then things, and as I mentioned, doing things that I've already done in the past. There's a question or a comment here, question and comment here from Michael that says, you guys are clearly very hyped about the flexibility of startups. which yes, I agree. He says, I love startups too, but to give a more balanced picture, can you add some more color to the downsides of a startup? For example, lack of budget, lack of data, lack of safety net, lack of time, the fact that it's not that you can do everything, but it's not the fact that you can do everything, but the fact that you have to do everything, or the startup will collapse under its own weight. And I think that's a really important point, and it really depends on the type of startup that you join. I know that when I had my own company, my own startup, we were failing so much more than we were winning. It was ridiculous. In the first year, we nearly went bankrupt 4 times, and it's like, shit, it's only a year. How do you mess up that much? We did. We messed up way too much, and it was a lot of pressure, a lot of sleepless nights. It was definitely way out of our depth. And I had an old colleague of mine that we were in business together, so we're business partners, and we had some investment. So we got an investor early on, and we thought that the investor could really guide us and give us a lot of that. We could leverage his experience, and we found that this investor, he had originally had a startup 12 years before, and then that startup grew to like 200 people, and then he sold off. So then the advice that he was giving us as a 2-person new startup, he was approaching his advice as somebody who runs a 200-person company, not a 2-person company. So we found that we were spending a lot of money in these irrelevant things, and we were sort of just taking his advice kind of blindly because we were just I don't know, naive kids, and we basically like nearly failed almost all the time. It felt, and the pressure definitely mounts. And having no data, you have to be creative. You have to be creative in finding customers and creating partnerships and building up those assets. And for me now, the startup that I joined, it's a funded startup that before it was created, it came out of a joint venture between 2 companies, and they established this new company, and they both put funds in this new company. And then those funds give us a runway, which is essentially like a pool of money that if we stay lean, it could last a couple of years. And we also have, as part of this new setup, we have access to data, and we have conversations and links to potential customers. So the setup of this startup is completely different to the setup when I had my own startup, and I was really sort of naive to think, well, you can start from scratch. You can have, we had no contacts, no knowledge of business, no understanding of the market. We were just 2 guys that were really passionate about analytics. And we thought, you know, we've been doing consulting for a while. We could probably do this ourselves. And as 2 independent consultants, we could do that, and we could, make a living, but we couldn't build a company easily. And because we didn't have all the assets that I was just mentioning that this new startup has. So that's something to think about as well, that you can be in a startup that's really like at step 0 or step -50 sometimes if it has no assets to leverage and no contacts. And there's other startups that come in with funding, with contacts, with data, with prospects for customers, and that gives you a huge leg up. That takes away a lot of this pressure that Michael was mentioning, that startups can definitely collapse under its own weight. How about Yuval, Phil? How do you guys think about the pressure that comes in startup land?
I don't know, but there's another question I would like to answer. I don't know if we've covered it actually. Was what would be some of the considerations when you would like to leave corporate and move on to a startup?
Nice.
I think that was one of the questions in the list, and I was looking at this earlier and thinking, like, one of the main considerations, well, it's more your situation. So once you get married, once you start having kids, once you get a mortgage, it becomes harder and harder to leave corporate land. because you've got responsibilities, you've got a mortgage to pay, you've got children to feed, you've got a wife to keep happy or a husband to keep happy. So that, that's it. When you're young, free and single and get fancy free, it's a lot easier to do. You can, maybe you can, if things go wrong, you can go and live with your mum and dad, but you get to a certain stage in life where that's not possible. But don't let that put you off. I mean, I've left corporate world twice, and on both occasions, literally the week after I resigned, on both occasions, my wife decided she wanted to upgrade our house, and I said, well, how am I going to get a mortgage? I've just resigned. So we
I had to mute it.
We scraped through it, but things like that do come into consideration. I mean, if you're in startup world, if you're asking for a mortgage, they'll want 3 years worth of your salary history. If you're just joined a startup, you might not have that. So don't let that put you off. Go for it, or don't get married and don't have kids.
You're on mute, Yuval.
Yeah, the kids were here earlier, so I had to mute it. There's a couple of questions on how to find a mentor. And I think there's really two ways. It's either someone that you've worked with before, or someone that you've met in some networking forum, or that you heard of and you've met up with. So yeah, clearly, there's someone that you've worked with before that you respect how they operate, and they don't necessarily have to be pure data science. It could be anyone, right? Then keep in touch. Just because you've left that job, not likely to work with them again. Keep in touch. Keep the connection. And I think one of the questions you actually answered, you provide one of the answers, Fiona. Yeah, maybe join Meetup first and go from there. Absolutely. Join the Meetup. Go to conferences. Go to events. If you see someone that you respect, that you're inspired by, go and chat to them. Make the connection. The one thing I would recommend is look for a mentor who is local. Because the face-to-face, the coffee is much more impactful than electronic, catch-ups. So yeah, try to prioritize someone who's local. Quite a few within Australia. Quite a few of the experienced professionals, they travel a lot anyway. So if they're not local, just be on to them about when are you next visiting Melbourne, and then make sure that you catch up with them for a coffee. Then make the effort, of course, to do it. So again, either someone that you've worked with or someone in the network that you've come across that you think is worth. Someone that inspires you, that you think you agree with a lot of their views and the way they do things, and then just get in touch.
I agree. I think having professional mentors is super important. And Yuval had some really good suggestions there. Meetups, really good. People you worked with in the past, really good. I would say also, as Phil mentioned earlier, actually, that's a really good way to pick who you should work for next. So when you think about your next job, you can find managers that really help mentor people. So if you admire somebody and you want to work with them, you can apply to work with them, and you will get some mentorship. If that's part of their leadership style, you will get some mentorship as a result. And the another avenue that I thought, which is a little bit looser than a face-to-face meeting, is and I'll do a shameless plug here, is I have a podcast called Data Futurology, where I interview leaders in the analytics space every week, and we talk about their journey, how they made it to where they are, what lessons they learned, what mistakes they had, and we talk about how they can how they've created value out of analytics. and obviously freely available resource. It's called Data Futurology. And if you want to hear Yuval's trajectory to his history and how he got to where he is, Yuval is on episode 57, and you can hear his journey, which I highly recommend.
I just wanted to add one more thing, and yeah, the podcast series overall is amazing. I see I'm not the only one who thinks that based on the comments. Very popular podcast series, some amazing people from around the world. But I just wanted to say one more thing about mentorship. Finding mentors is look for someone in your organization as well, if you can. So it's good to have very good to have an external mentor, because they're going to be objective. They're going to be unbiased about giving advice about how to operate day to day. Very, very important. But also, as well as that, try and get a mentor inside the organization. Sure, they'll be biased. They won't be as objective, but they'll be able to help you navigate within the organization, and because they know the organization, they're in it as well. And they don't have to be from your team. They don't have to be, I mean, your manager should already be a mentor, but you can also look for a mentor, a colleague in your team, or someone else that you respect that anywhere in your organization. They can have nothing to do with data science or with a technical person. In my experience, I've often looked for someone more from a business role to be a mentor to me, someone who's good at being a business person, as in a job. I've looked for those kind of people in my past to be a mentor to me, because those are areas that I felt I could do with some help with. So again, look for internal as well as external mentorship.
Hi, so thank you for you all today. So it's now the time to conclude the session. So I would like to say thank you for everyone who attended the session today. And I would also like to say thank you for Phil, Yuval, and Philip for supporting this event, and as well as our Lecture 11 for continuous support for our student club. And thank you for everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Guys.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for the good questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of good questions today.
Thanks guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.